Greetings once more. Good afternoon. Dan Gregory here on the Pandemic Podcast, here to deliver a review of Boris Johnson and his cronies' misrepresentation and almost deception that was delivered in tonight's broadcast. And I say that with no due caution, because during the course of that broadcast, was rapidly working behind the scenes, looking at the data, looking at the evidence that they were presenting, and believe me, all is not what it seems, and the British public need to know the truth. This video follows a previous video which I recorded just ahead of the pandemic. I'm not going to go into the full details of all the data, but I encourage you to watch that one as well, and please do share this video, because I can guarantee that the BBC right now are not dissecting the data in the way that I'm about to share with you. This is really, really important, ladies and gentlemen of Britain, and I know this has been a challenging year for people. I know this has been a frustrating year. I know there's been challenges in terms of health. People have lost lives. It's a really serious situation. But what is not acceptable is the level of lies, deception and misrepresentation that this government is continuing to deploy on the British public. And I say deploy with a real conviction, because what I saw tonight is not fact. There's a lot of things that aren't factual. They're misrepresented, and I'm going to be very, very clear. I'm going to share very, very carefully the facts that I've already started to reverse engineer and analyze from credible sources here. So, first of all, Boris, I'll review what happened in the announcement. Boris opened up by talking that saying that London and the southeast is spreading more rapidly, and we do know that. And in the previous video, I talked about how we've seen this trend, we've seen this pattern. We've seen the pattern from the northwest of England, which had a peak back at the early to mid stage of October, and then we saw a peak in the Midlands, central England, around early to mid November, and now we're seeing a peak in the south and the southeast in early to mid London. And I'll go specifically into the growth rates in a minute, because it's really important, because if you were watching that and hadn't looked at any prior data, you would probably not know about those previous peaks that we've seen in the geographic areas across the United Kingdom at the earlier points during the year, the winter season. And you would probably not know or see or get context on the rise in the data, because there's never any context, is there, ladies and gentlemen? But I'll give you some context, because I have the numbers here. So Boris opened up by saying London and the southeast are rising more rapidly. Yes, they are, as predicted. Yes, they are, as the previous areas have already done so. And then they come to a peak and they start to fall. Now, the big burden of this conversation was around the new variant. The new variant. Now, there's a website, I think it's called nextstrain.org or nextstrain.com. I'll post it in the links after this. They've been tracking all the variants since the beginning of the year. To be clear, viruses mutate. We know that. Science has shown us that for decades. You'll see all the variations. There's been around 4,000 variations since the beginning of the year. Now, most of them are insignificant. Sometimes they're more significant. I'll talk more about the specifics in a minute on that. I've emailed the Professor Peter Hornby, who's the chair of the nerve tag group that Boris referenced, for more information. I want to see firsthand the evidence that they have, but I'll show you the evidence that we do have. They assert that the virus, this new strain, could increase the R rate by 0.4 or more. And I'll come on to that in a minute in terms of the numbers that we've already observed in these areas, because I have the numbers right here. So, he said it may be up to 70% more transmissible. But that's from early data, which is subject to review. Of course it is. And it's now spreading very, very fast. And they talked about this new strain in such a dramatic way that would lead you to believe that this is a very, very significant development. However, there is some published data on this new strain. And I've got it right here from the British Medical Journal. Which is, again, one of the most esteemed medical journals that you could possibly read. It's very credible. So they were talking, and they showed graphs. They showed graphs on the screen which showed the increase in this new variant in percentage terms on the screen. In percentage terms, which showed an increase in London, the southeast and the east of this new variant, okay? But percentages, what do percentages tell us in real terms? What do they actually tell us? They tell us nothing. Because what's interesting, they mentioned that they discovered this new variant as early as late September. Now bear in mind already The virus has been mutating since the beginning of the year. We've already seen over 4,000 variants. And in fact, within the British Medical Journal, I'll post the link within the comments at the end of this video. They've already previously identified other mutation earlier in the year, which none of us heard about, did we? There was a new variant called the D614G. I think it's a G, it might be a 6, depending on my handwriting. So it's either D614G or D614G, depending on which my handwriting. But this new, more rapidly transmissible, by the way, this new variant was discovered early in the year, more transmissible, but it's now the most dominant form of the virus in the United Kingdom. But did we hear one iota about that more rapidly transmitting version of the virus earlier in the year? Did we hear anything in the news? To most people, they see the news headlines and think this is the first time the virus is mutated. It hasn't. It's mutated more than 4,000 times already this year. This other mutation earlier this year, the D6146, I'll clarify, happened earlier in the year, and it's the most... it was a more rapidly transmissible form of the virus, and it's now the dominant form in the United Kingdom. But the way this new variant was talked about in today's press conference, which has led to, by the way, here's the changes that's happened. If you haven't seen the changes, I say Christmas in the headline is practically cancelled. The reality is it's been significantly reduced. So here's what's been announced. New restrictions, Tier 4, effectively a lockdown in London and the South East. A Tier 4 lockdown in London and the South East. So all non-essential retail will close. Gyms will close. Personal care, hairdressers, etc. will close. There's going to be no overseas travel. No overseas travel for those in Tier 4 in London and South East. Lockdown, not only your own country, but you can't even get out of the country. You're being asked to work from home. You're not allowed to leave or enter Tier 4 areas, London or the South East. You can only meet one person outdoors. Places of worship will remain open. So it's essentially a full-scale lockdown, but without international travel. You can't leave the country. You're stuck. You're literally stuck. If you wanted to find a way to get out of this, you can't. You can't even leave the area. So that's Christmas cancelled for all of London and the South East, unless your family are in the area. Number two, they're encouraging all citizens of the United Kingdom to consider travel full stop within the United Kingdom and to consider whether you should travel abroad. I would not be surprised in the new year to see travel restrictions placed upon the British citizens. Now, I'm not saying that to create fear, but that's the first time we've seen major travel restrictions. And then finally, Christmas. I'm sorry. Christmas, unfortunately, Tier 4, there's no mixed households in the for Christmas. No mixed households, except within support bubbles in Tier 4. Now, the 5 days of Christmas that we talked about previously has become the one day of Christmas. It's become the one day of Christmas. 3 households can mix for one day only. It was not clear whether they're cancelling the 4 other days in terms of whether you can then still travel but not mix with 3 households. They didn't clarify that, but certainly the 3 household rules only applies on Christmas Day. And they say they must be guided by the science. So let's get to the big reveal here. And the whole thing was pitched like a sales pitch, and I'll come to that in a minute. But this new gene, this new variant that they were talking about, and this is what you won't see on the BBC, you won't see it in the Guardian, you won't see it in the Telegraph. Why are they not going to ask these questions that I'm asking you today? Guess how many cases of this new variant have been discovered since its early discovery in late September? The way they were talking about it, and they talked about it in percentage terms, as I said, they talked about it in terms of percentages. Percentages tell us nothing. There has been exactly, since late September, 1,108 cases of this new variant across the entire nation. Let me say that again. With all the up and down of that broadcast today, there's only been 1,108 cases detected of this new variant across the entirety of the United Kingdom. 1,108. Of, by the way, how many cases there have been in total this year, since the late September? I've got it here. Where is it? 1.5 million cases since late September. So Of that 1.5 million cases since late September, there has only been 1,108 recorded cases of this new variant. Let me say that again. Of the 1.5 plus million cases that have been registered since late September, only 1,108 of them are the new variant. So if this new variant, by the way, is as rapidly transmissible as they made out tonight on that broadcast, then surely it would be a much greater proportion of that 1.5 million cases. You would think that, wouldn't you? Now, 1,108 cases of a total of 1.5 million plus. It's actually 1,558,622 cases, to be very specific, since late September. And I deemed late September as the 25th of September. It could be earlier. There's been over 1.5 million cases since late September, but only 1,108 of this new variant, which is exactly or roughly 0.07%. It's 0.07% of the overall number of cases since late September. So the way they were talking about it, they were talking about it significantly as though it's a major new contributor to cases. It's 1,108 cases of 1.5 million discovered since September, late September, 25th of September, that's the date I used, which is 0.07%. Now, will the BBC mention that at all today, or even in the next week? Will the Independent, or the Guardian, or the Financial Times, or any of the major press talk about the fact that the British Medical Journal has already shown that there's only 1,108 cases of this new variant? And bear in mind, there's over 4,000 new variants. Why can we not get the truth? Why can we not get the truth from our government? Why can they not act with intelligence and integrity? Why do they have to use deception and misrepresentation to hold the country in fear? It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So as I've already mentioned, if you've just joined us, there was a new variant discovered earlier this year, which is now the dominant form of the virus, but we heard nothing about it in the press. This has been strategically used at this time to impart fear around Christmas. And now Christmas is practically cancelled. This is causing mass devastation across the UK. Now, Patrick Vallance went on to say, Patrick Vallance, quote, said to assume you are infectious. As I mentioned in the previous video, this is torture. This is psychological torture. This is psychological manipulation. To tell human beings to assume they're infectious is, frankly, verging on evil, if not evil. If that was true, I'd have no problem with it. But the reality is, as I stated earlier on, the latest report from the Office of National Statistics, which analysed the total number of positive tests in the last 6 weeks, and I only use official statistics, the Office of National Statistics report that showed the number of positive tests over the last 6 weeks was 0.82%. So 0.82% of all the tests that were done in the last 6 weeks were positive, meaning that the 99.18 remaining percent of the tests were negative. So why would the 99.18% of the population who tested negative assume that they are infectious? That is torture. That is psychological manipulation. Now, of course, to be transparent, the test is a point in time. It's a point in time. You could get tested negative in a moment and you could bump into someone who's infectious. But based upon that ratio, if only 0.82% on average are positive, what are the chances? You've got less than a 1 in 100 chance of coming into contact with someone who has tested positive. And even if they have tested positive, at that level of prevalence, it's a low rate of prevalence, it is known that in low prevalence situations, there's a higher number of false positives. That's scientific fact. That's a statistical fact. Not only that, that doesn't even get us started on symptomatic or asymptomatic transmission. Boris said that over a third of cases are transmitted asymptomatically. I say, where is your evidence? Where is your evidence? And I talked in the previous video, and I'm going to talk about it again. We must place the burden of proof on the government now. We must do that. We must place the burden of proof upon the MPs, the SAGE group, and the government and demand the truth. Because where is the evidence for asymptomatic transmission? Asymptomatic means you have no symptoms. Now, if you're coughing, you're spluttering, of course, you're going to be, there's going to be viral shedding of a higher level. You're going to have a higher viral load for a start, scientifically proven, plus you're going to be shedding more virus. If you're asymptomatic, you're going to have a lower viral load and you're lower shedding, if any at all. And there's, I've read 15 recent papers on asymptomatic transmission, which all say that that's negligible. So we must demand the truth. So let's recap. Boris announces new restrictions in the United Kingdom. A tier 4 restriction for the southeast and London, which effectively is a national lockdown with non-essential shops closed, gyms closed, personal care closed, no overseas travel. No overseas travel, that's a critical piece. Must work from home if possible, cannot enter or leave tier 4, which is London and the southeast, and you can only meet one person outdoors. Now, let's look at the data. So, London and the southeast. What I've done here is looked at the transmission rates in the northwest, where I mentioned the peak was seen in October, the Midlands, which was seen in November, and then the southeast and London, which was seen in December. So northwest had its peak of 5,595 cases in a day on the 20th of October. So I looked at the growth rate for the previous month. The previous month, from the 20th of September. The growth rate for the previous month was 25%. So the northwest in the previous month, the growth rate was 25%. Now, we look at the Midlands. In fact, no, that's not correct. That's 208. I missed the point. It's 258%. It's 258% in 1 month. Northwest. From the 20th of September to the 20th of October. I stand corrected. I can't read my own writing. I was scribbling away. 258% increase in 1 month. Northwest. West Midlands, for their peak on the 10th of November, 3,641 cases in a day. Up from 920 on the 10th of October, the month previous. A growth rate of 296% rising to the peak. That's the Midlands. Remember I said Northwest, October, Midlands, November, Southeast and London. Let's look at these numbers. Southeast, the month preceding the current peak of 3,278 cases, was a growth rate of 25% in the previous month. London, to the peak on the 12th of December of 4,660 cases for the previous month, a growth rate of 64%. So in the month preceding the current peak in London, 64%. The peak in the southeast, 25% within the previous month. Yet, the West Midlands, 296% in the month preceding. The northwest, 258%. So they're saying it's growing faster in London and the southeast. Now, whilst it's true, it is growing more rapidly in the most recent days. It absolutely is. The last week is growing faster in these areas. The month preceding shows that this is not an exponential growth rate in these areas. Bear in mind that this variant has been around since the end of September. Now, get this. Further wonderful truths from your government here. I think this video will probably lead to me being censored because I'm not standing down. I'm not standing down for this. I'm not tolerating this. Matt Hancock on the 14th of December in the House of Parliament said that we may associate the rise in, there may be an association between the rise in cases in the north and in the southeast, but it's not necessarily causing the rise. Matt Hancock in the House of Parliament said that this new variant may be associated with, but it's not necessarily causing it. So remember in the previous video, I said this. If you look at the shopping trends in December, you can associate an increase in shopping with the cold weather in December. If you track the temperature in December with shopping habits, you would see an association between more shopping in December and the cold weather. Now, is the cold weather the cause? What else happens in December, friends? Which just has been cancelled? Christmas, that's right. So Christmas is the cause. Christmas is the correlating factor, the causation, which drives shopping patterns in December. Not the cold weather, but it's associated with. Now, this entire government is constantly using correlation and association to make policy decisions. So, let's recap from the top. Data is showing that the cases are rising more rapidly in London and the southeast. This is fact. This is fact. This is true. However, they're using the notion of a new variant to justify the changes in policy. Changes in policy including a new Tier 4 effectively lockdown in London and the South East, where all non-essential retail outlets are going to close, gyms will close, personal care outlets will close, no overseas travel, must work from home where possible, cannot enter or leave Tier 4 areas, can only meet one person outdoors in the London and the South East. Travel, the population of Britain have been asked to consider whether they should travel outside their own areas and even consider overseas travel. Christmas in Tier 4, there's no longer any mixed households in all of London or the South East of England. No mixed households on Christmas at all, except within support bubbles. And for the rest of England, only 3 households may meet on Christmas Day. So Christmas is effectively cancelled. All because of this hype around the new variant. Where is the evidence? Well, as I've shared in this video, 1,108 cases since late September of the 1.5 million total cases is attributed to this new variant, according to the British Medical Journal. Now, Hancock in the House of Parliament said there's an association, but not necessarily a causal link. Yet this new variant has been used to captivate the minds and hearts of the public to put them into fear. Now, guess what happens towards the end of the broadcast? It's like a big sales pitch. If you've ever been to a personal development event, you've ever been to a seminar where you've got multi-speakers on the stage and they give you the sales pitch and it's the run to the back of the room sales pitch. Well, the energy in the broadcast with Chris Whitty was pretty much like one of those sales pitches. It really was. Because at the end of all this, with all the hype and all the fear and all the misrepresentation and deception that I've shared with you in this video, guess what the way out was? Guess what the big way out is? The big V. It's the big V. That's the sales pitch. Vaccines are coming. We're going to shut you down, put you in fear, so that come New Year, you will take the vaccine. Regardless of the underlying data, regardless of the reality of the situation, and I've already talked about the statistical errors within the hospitals and mortality in the previous video, I'm not going to go into depth on that, but it was pretty much an aggressive sales pitch for vaccination. Everything came back to vaccination. They made comments that other countries around Europe will be doing similar measures and coordination, which says it all. It says it all. And you know, I'm not going to get into any form of conspiracy here, but this fear, these measures are being used explicitly to drive vaccine uptakes. Explicitly. And guess what? There's a lot of money on the table. Patrick Vallance has £600,000 worth of shares in vaccine companies. You know, Bill Gates says that vaccines produce a 20 to 1 return. That's 12 million on 600,000. That's 12 million payday. You know, I can't say that's an association. I can't follow the approach that they follow. That's an association. It's not necessarily a cause. To be clear, it's not necessarily a cause. But we must ask questions about these conflicts of interest. 14 out of the 20 most senior advisors within the SAGE committee all have funding from vaccine manufacturers or work for vaccine manufacturers. So, I'm not going to go into the specifics around vaccines. I'm not going to talk about products or anything like that. I'm simply making the point that the entire presentation that was given tonight led to an end point which led to drumming home the vaccine. So you have to ask, with all the deception in the numbers and the figures, why? Why can we, how can we tolerate this? How can we tolerate this now? You know, you've just come off that broadcast. The BBC will dissect it, but how many of them are going to talk about the fact there's only 1,108 cases of that new strain out of 1.5 million since September? How many are going to look at the growth rates of the different regions across the United Kingdom and see that in the month preceding the peak in every other area, the Northwest and the Midlands, compared to the Southeast and London, was more significant? How can they get away with this? It's my question. And I want to drill in. You know, I've been broadcasting on this thing for months now. I do so with care and love, and I want to see no harm come to anyone. But no harm cannot be exclusively reserved for those who have coronavirus. There is a whole range of illnesses that are being, quite frankly, ignored right now. Quite frankly ignored. There's misdiagnosis, mistreatments. We're seeing operations being cancelled, surgeries being cancelled. We're seeing businesses shut down. We're seeing unemployment going through the roof. We're seeing all of these things. Christmas taken away. 1,600 people per day die over Christmas every year. 1,600. It's a fact. But a lot of those people now will die alone this year because of these policies. That is not acceptable. We have to come face to face with our own mortality. We have to come face to face with our own risk. And we have to be adult about those risks. But we have to lose the obsession with safety. And we have to see things as they are, not worse than they are. But we cannot see things as they are whilst we're continually bombarded by misrepresentation of the data like this. And we have to stand up against it. So on Monday, I'm going to be revealing a campaign which is going to place the burden of proof, upon the government. I have a series of questions that we must ask every single MP because they don't see it. I'm convinced they don't see it, but they must see it. They must see it. So on Monday, I'm going to be sending out a campaign to every person who's subscribing to the podcast, and you can subscribe at danjgregory.com/pandemic. It's vital that we join this campaign and demand the truth. I'm doing nothing other than asking the politicians to answer a very specific set of questions. People are saying there's no sound. Perhaps I have been cut off. I used the V word too many times. Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me? You can't say the V word. You can't say the V word on social media. No sound. No sound? Can someone tell me whether you can hear me or not? Close it and try it again. Oh, so it's specific to individuals, okay. So, on Monday we're starting a campaign where we're going to demand that the MPs answer these key questions. There may be interference on the feed. I said this is probably the video that gets me shut down. Because enough is enough. Enough is enough. You cannot, days before Christmas, come and lie to the British public to misrepresent the facts and expect the public to tolerate it. There are people who won't ask questions. There are people who won't look beneath the surface. But I do look beneath the surface. The reason I started this podcast is to ask questions. It's called Question Everything. It's not deliberately to create a counter-narrative. It's to get to the truth. It's to get to the facts. It's to get to understand what is the impact of the virus. What are the most effective treatments? What's really going on in hospitals? Who is really dying of the virus? And how can we prevent that? But we can only do that from a place of truth and a place of integrity. And I'm sick to death now of seeing our government lie to us on television, to completely deceive in the way they present. They may present accurate figures around the percentages, but percentages don't tell us anything. And did they once mention that only 1,108 cases have been discovered of this new variant? Yet they've made it out it's the most rapidly transforming rapidly transmitting across the UK. Well, if it's been transmitting since September, it's not moving that fast. There's only 1,108 known cases of it compared to the 1.5 million cases that have been discovered in total since the end of September. So, we must demand the truth. These people are acting out of complete integrity. For me, integrity is king. What led me on this path of discovery around all the different data and the science was pure curiosity, based upon the fact that I saw a disconnect between the reality and the way it's being portrayed. And it's happening over and over and over again. I will not tolerate it. Lives are being destroyed because of it. And I care about all lives. I care about all lives, not just those who are sadly being challenged by coronavirus, but every life. Every life is important. And in order to protect all lives now, we must stand up and demand the truth. So once again, if you've just joined, this is a long video, but to recap, new tiers announced. Tier 4 has been revealed, which is going to be unveiled in London and the South East. It's effectively a full lockdown, with no exit or entrance into Tier 4 areas in London and the South East. No international travel. Travel full stop is being asked to be considered across the UK, and I wouldn't be surprised to see further travel restrictions going into the new year. 3, Christmas is effectively being cancelled. Tier 4, no mixed households at all, and only 3 households to meet on Christmas Day only, as part of the restrictions. Now, this has all been attributed to a new strain of the virus, as I've mentioned already. There's only been 1,108 cases of this new strain since the end of September, according to the British Medical Journal. And since the end of September, there's been 1.5 plus million cases of all forms of the virus. So it's a very small percentage. It's 0.07% of the total group. Now, if it is a serious variant and we need to take due caution, I'm all for it. But the evidence so far doesn't tell us that. And once again, Matt Hancock in the House of Parliament said there's an association between this new variant, but it's not necessarily a cause. And that's been the problem all year. Association and correlation, not causation. Not causation. Why are people in hospital? How many of them are symptomatic? How many of them are being treated for symptoms of COVID-19? How many of them are being treated for pneumonia attributed to COVID-19? We don't have the data. It's all blurred into one. Test positive in hospital, that's it. They don't mention that 75% of all the hospitalization cases around COVID, 75% of them were tested positive in hospital, not prior to. Of course, some of them will be emerging with symptoms once they enter hospital, but how many? We just don't know. Every person who dies with a positive test, regardless of the cause of death, goes on the death certificate. You know, on Monday, in addition to this campaign, I'm going to be looking to speak with the Lawyers for Liberty team, about class action suites, because I believe, you know, there's people who've been falsely categorized as dying with coronavirus, and it's just a lie. It's false. Yet the poor family have had to deal with that. The mental trauma of believing that their family member has passed away due to coronavirus, and they haven't got the truth. And that's not just. That's unjust. And similarly, how many people who have lost their lives prematurely because they weren't able to access medical care, because the GPs were closed, you couldn't get an appointment, or the diagnosis or the treatment wasn't available to you. These people deserve justice. We need to push for class action. There's so much injustice this year, and I've had enough. I won't stand for it. So, on Monday I'll be announcing the Burden of Proof campaign, whereby the intention is to write to every single MP in the United Kingdom and answer some very specific questions. And if they don't have the data, then we have a problem. And if they can't see the problem with the data, then we have an even bigger issue. But this is the point. We must start with ensuring that the MPs can see quite clearly right now what the real issues are. Because without that, we can't effectively challenge. And then we need public pressure. So, I want to thank each of you for watching this. I've gone on a lot. I'll come and do another video on this on Monday in more succinct form. I'm kind of overcome with rage and anger at the minute, and I'm trying to be calm and compassionate. But it's not acceptable to deceive the public in the way that we've seen today. It's not acceptable to have people's Christmases torn apart in the way we've seen today, with misrepresentations of the facts. It's not acceptable. And remember, 0.82% of all tests are test positive, according to the Office of National Statistics. Yet that means that 99.18% are negative. Yet Patrick Vallance goes on record to say we must all assume that we have the virus. There's no evidence for that. It's not acceptable. And this is medical tyranny, and it's time to stand up. This is no conspiracy. Look at all the numbers. I'll reference all the data. You can look at it yourself. And it's time to take a stand as the British public. This is not just happening in Britain. This is happening across Europe. This is an unbelievable time, and it's time that we stand up for truth. So please do subscribe right now to danjgregory.com/pandemic. The link's in the top of the page here, and I'll be announcing the campaign on Monday, and we're going to start rapid and urgent action to demand the truth from our politicians. So I'm sorry about the news. I don't have anything positive to share other than the fact we have this campaign coming, and it's the beginning of something very important, and I want you to be part of it. So thanks for watching. Stay positive, channel loving energy, be good to one another, and together we will get through this. It's most important that we retain a sense of hope, and we must stay in integrity. If we want to see others to lead with integrity, we must lead with integrity ourselves. We have to be the change we want to see. This is time to lead with love and compassion and empathy, and to connect and reconnect with people, because we're being divided by the press and the government, and it's time to love one another and come back together to demand the truth. It's down to us. So please subscribe right now to danjgregory.com/pandemic, and I'll be emailing out the campaign details on Monday. Thanks very much for tuning in, and thanks for sharing, and thanks for commenting. Really appreciate you. Goodbye.